A very warm good morning to everybody present here. I'm Aparna Kimroy, and I welcome you back to another session of the NET lecture series. For our resource person for today's lecture, we have Mrs. Arundhati R. Dubey, ma'am. Ma'am is a Ph.D. scholar at I.E.H.E. Bhopal, and ma'am cleared her MP set in 2023, and ma'am had also cleared NET in December of 2023. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
So we'll begin. First of all, good morning to you all. We meet again, and hearty good morning to all the faculty members present. Today we are supposed to discuss Puritan age, which we definitely will discuss. But who else other than John Milton, right? Who has encompassed all the Puritan sensibilities in the English literature. So we definitely will talk about John Milton. And if we are talking about John Milton, then we need to know that Milton lived through the lives of 4 monarchs. 4 governments changed through his life. So he was born in 1608, and during that time, King James I was the ruler, which is known as the Jacobean period in literature. Okay, and then during Milton's prolific adult years, during his prime, there were 2 tumultuous governments. One was the rule of the King Charles I, very controversial rule, we'll see why. And then there was the Puritan age. Okay, and that Puritan age is an 11-year period. It was from 1649 to 1660. And that was a very reactionary age, which we cannot study in isolation, obviously. So we need to know thoda sa context aage piche ka. So that is how we'll go. Okay. And then when John Milton's most prolific works and the works for which Milton is known as, that is the epic Paradise Lost and a closet drama Samson Agonistes and then an appeal on Paradise Regained were published. That was the time when restoration of monarchy had happened. And in English literature, that time period from 1660 to 1685 we know as restoration period. Okay, so we will not go too much into detail of the restoration period, obviously, but we'll see a little bit about Jacobean period and Caroline, of course, and then we'll come to the Puritan age. Okay, so that it's very clear. So we begin. So I think you guys have done in your last sessions till Elizabethan period. So from Elizabethan, as Elizabethan period ends, Jacobean period starts with the rule of King James VI of Scotland, who became the King James I of England. So we all know that. But how was the time? How was the society in that age? There were a lot of problems in the society. It was plagued with religious bigotry and I mean, be it hygiene, education, all those things were neglected during the Elizabethan period as well. Yes, literacy was growing. People were reading. There was advent of printing press in the 16th century. But still, largely the society was not literate, and society was very, very religious. So it did matter to them that what is the belief, what is the faith of their monarch. Now, one commendable thing about Elizabeth I was that in spite of all of these differences, she was able to bring a national consciousness. She was able to give English arts, English culture, a strong standpoint in the European sphere. So that is why, of course, Queen Elizabeth I is eulogized rightfully. But there were many problems that were neglected during her reign. Now, once she was dethroned, and King James King James VI of Scotland came to the throne of England. What happened was that a lot of people started dissenting his rule. Also, main reason was because he was Scottish, and English tutors did not want any Scottish heirs to come to their throne. So some people who were advocates of Protestantism and who were still empathizing with the Tudor dynasty, they started dissenting. So then what happened? There was a gunpowder plot against King James VI, which is known as the Guy Fawkes Day. I mean, you guys might already know this, right? then there was a rise of Puritanism in Parliament. During this time, there was rise of Puritanism. What is Puritanism? We'll see in the coming slides. Also in 1600, Queen Elizabeth I had established in East India Company. So England was becoming a colonial power, and Spain, especially with Spain and France, they were struggling to mark a hold in Asian and African territories. So then, when the traders and the merchants, they went out from the boundaries, national boundaries, they went to foreign places. So they were able to see a certain kind of power. They were able to see exotic materials. They were bringing home a lot of wealth. So people were sort of keeping these traders, explorators, on a pedestal. So they were feeling that they are also important. Other than monarchy, there could be power that they can also possess. Okay, so this is important, that who were the people mainly. अभी हम आगे जब देखेंगे तो we'll see that Puritans का जो political agenda था, that was a lot of it was funded by these traders, these merchants, these explorators who were going out and bringing in a lot of resources for the English people, the English nation. Okay. Yes, because there was a rise in literacy and leadership, so individual thought was coming up. Already we know that it was because of the Renaissance that individual also mattered. So when individual matters, what happens? Everyone feels that their opinion is important, and this is exactly what happened at the peak in Puritan period. We'll see that everyone had their own opinion, their own individual thoughts, and a glue that was present during the Elizabethan period, a glue that binded them with the national consciousness, that became missing. That became very missing. Then yes, of course, there was a rise in publishing houses and printing of pamphlets. And then what happened because of this? Pamphleteering happened, pamphlet wars happened. That also we'll get into in detail. Yes, so Elizabethan era को golden era बोलते हैं, but it was a myth. I mean, of course, it was a political narrative. C.E. Trevelyan, if we study C.E. Trevelyan, who was a English baron, and he was also a historian. He has also written about on education of India. He was a contemporary of Macaulay. So he has said that Elizabethan golden era was a myth because society was illiterate, feudal, and sexist, and Elizabeth literally did nothing to. She sort of distracted everyone in arts and culture, and I mean that's majorly his argument. And that what were the ramifications when leaders do that? Usually when the leaders go away and you don't have that leader to look up to, then what happens? Everything just breaks loose, and that's exactly what happened. So before we get into the rule of King Charles I and Puritanism, we need to know very clearly certain terminology. Okay, that's why this slide. So we will start with the Reformation. What happened in Reformation? That people were fed up of the Roman Catholic corrupt practices, indulgences, pardons, and all. A lot of abuse that the clergy and the popes instilled on people. So what was the reaction? The Reformation was started by Martin Luther King. We know that. In early 16th century, in early 1500s in Germany. It then spread to other parts of Europe. In England, Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth's father, he declared himself the head of the Church of England, and Protestantism was officially established in England. Yes, it did happen. It was a paper degree which was passed overnight, but the religion is not that simple. It is people's faith. It's their identity. Just because a king has passed a decree does not mean that okay, from tomorrow onwards now I will not believe in pardons, I will not believe in indulgences, or I will not believe in pope, or I will not believe in the clergy that lives next door. Does it happen like that? It is not that simple. It takes generations to change social conditioning, religious conditioning. So immediately when such dynamic changes happen, for time being, a lot of dissent was controlled by Henry and then Elizabeth, but it all broke loose in the 17th century, in the early 1600s. So English Protestantism, see now in the right side, this Protestantism, English Protestantism came to be known as Anglicanism. Okay, and this Anglicanism then further had a divided opinion. Some people wanted episcopal system and some became Presbyterian. What is the meaning by that? And does anyone know? Right now I cannot read your chats. So unmute yourself if anyone wants to talk and wants to share. Anyone?
Ma'am, as far as I know, it is a branch of Catholic Church, where it is governed by the elders of the society.
Which one?
Presbyterians.
No. It is actually very simple. It is Protestantism only, but in episcopal system, they believed that just like in Roman Catholic, to reach God, you needed popery, you needed clergymen. They wanted the same system to continue. See, in Roman Catholicism, what happened that you were not allowed to, you were not allowed to keep even Bible at your home, because your home apparently is not a sanctimonious place. And also back then in the 14th and the 15th centuries, people were not even literate to read the Bible, so they did not keep the Bible. And why was this into practice? Because if you will read, then you will have your own opinion and you will question why. So that was also a form of control. Now, Protestantism, what happened that some people wanted this system to continue, that we will go and listen to the sermons by the clergies, we will listen to their commentaries, and especially जो rituals होते हैं उसके लिए भी they thought that it is better that it continues in that manner. But then there is a lot of chance of the same corruption continuing. So Presbyterianism was a reactionary wing, and what did they want? Presbyterians, they said that we do not want any middlemen, we will directly read the Bible, we will do the rituals ourselves. जैसे baptism होता है ना, तो Presbyterians said that, and Puritans believed in this. Puritans said कि baptism which happens in the infancy should be stopped, because a person, when he or she attains a certain age of understanding, should baptize themselves. They should consciously enter into this faith and belief. Okay, so this was Presbyterianism. They did not want popery to continue, and Episcopals were a branch of Protestants only. They wanted that same system to continue. Okay, तो अब जो 17th century में जो struggle है या जो dissent है, that is not between Catholic or Protestant. That is mainly Episcopal system and Presbyterian system. Okay, and then Presbyterians के जितना जो भी philosophies था, this is a European word. वो sentiments England में Puritan बन गए. Why Puritan? They claimed कि जो भी remnants हैं Roman Catholicism के, जैसे पोपरी है, ये इंडल्जेंसेस, पार्डन्स, जो अभी भी लोग अब पहले तो व्हेन कैथोलिसिज्म वाज लेजिटिमेट इन इंग्लैंड, तो दे वुड चार्ज 10 shilling फॉर अ पार्डन, and after King Henry VIII's degree, they would it became in black, under the carpet. They started charging 25 shilling, 100 shilling. It was still happening. It was illegitimately happening because people believed in it. Faith cannot be changed by a simple degree, a simple paper decree. Okay, so then these things were happening, and Puritans claimed that all the corrupt practices, अभी भी Catholicism का जितना भी society में है, they claim that we will purify it. Okay, so we will completely get rid of the popery culture in Christianity. This did not bode well with certain people. Certain people did not like it, and those people were Episcopals. Okay, so and now come to the left hand side corner. इंग्लिश पॉलिटिकल फैक्शंस. अब ये सब जो हम बातें कर रहे हैं ये फेथ और बिलीफ की बात तो नहीं है. दिस इज पावर स्ट्रगल. They are using religious tool just to somehow gain some sort of power, be it the power of material or the power to the court, power to make decisions. Everyone has their own agenda. तो this is the background. ये clear हुआ? थोड़ा confusing तो नहीं था? And anyone?
Yes, ma'am, it is clear.
Okay. तो politically इन factions को हम लोग कैसे देखेंगे? Royalists, Cavaliers, and these royalists, these Cavaliers are people who believed in episcopal system. They had some Catholic sentiments, they had some Catholic sympathies. Okay, and ये है किंग चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट के रॉयलिस्ट, जो किंग चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट में बिलीव करते थे. ही वॉज एन एपिस्कोपल. ही वॉज नॉट ओपनली एन एपिस्कोपल. Why he couldn't openly declare himself to be an episcopal, that also we will see, but he had those sympathies. And then there were Puritans or Presbyterians. Okay, Puritans and Puritan अगर हम अब इस क्लास में बोले तो it will be Oliver Cromwell and John Milton. Okay, the two very forebearer names in this period would be Oliver Cromwell and John Milton. ठीक है. And then these are some other factions of Christianity that have developed over the years. ये देख लेना आप लोग, ऐसे मैं जीके के लिए डाल दिया ये. So we will now come to King Charles the First. Just see, so that it's not confusing. Abhi we talked about what happened in Jacobean period. Okay, because after King Elizabeth's rule, when King James the First came, so what all were the problems? Now these problems have continued to the Caroline age, which is the age of the King Charles the First. Okay, which now we will see. Okay, and then accordingly ऐसे ही we will see the Puritan age कि Oliver Cromwell के rule में क्या हुआ 11 years के rule में. Okay. Okay, so King Charles the First, he believed in the divine right to rule, and that was very problematic because Renaissance had come, and individual and Parliament had also come. Why was Parliament in place in the English court? Because they were representative of the public. Parliament was supposed to be the representative of individual thought and individual expression. People wanted their beliefs to be taken into account when a monarch is making decisions for the nation. But Charles the First है ना, हाँ Charles the First को ना थोड़ा तुगलक के जैसे देखो. Actually एकदम वैसा ही इसका रूल था. Incidentally तुगलक पढ़ा है गिरीश कर्नाड का. But I mean, anyways, we all know Tughlaq as a historical figure. He was whimsical. He was fanatic. He was very futuristic, and he was not understood in his times. So, the end Tughlaq faced similar end Charles the First faced. Okay. So what he did? He waged a war against Spain and France whimsically. Why? Because Spain and France were getting ahead in the colonial game. In African and Asian continents, they were getting ahead. So everyone wanted colonial supremacy in exotic lands. So he waged a war against them, and also there were a lot of political issues which we will not go into. But what were the repercussions on the English society? They imposed ship taxes. Okay, and they were very heavy taxes. Every explorator that was going out, he was taxed heavily. So obviously Parliament revolted. That was one thing. Another thing is his wife, King Charles the First's wife. Who was King Charles the First? He was the son of. He was legitimate son of James the Sixth of Scotland and James the First. Okay, उनका ही legitimate son King Charles the First था. So as James the One died, he succeeded the throne naturally. So So yeah, his wife, King Charles the First, की wife Henrietta Maria, she was a Roman Catholic, but England was Protestant. So that also English people did not like. Uh, there were rumors that she is instigating Charles to destroy the English society, destroy Protestantism, and so Charles started hearing rumors of Henrietta Maria's assassination. That he started hearing rumors. King Charles the First started hearing rumors that some parliamentary members are conspiring to kill the wife, kill the queen. So King Charles the First, what did he do? He banned the parliament. He banished parliament from the court, which is known as the 11-year tyranny. It is an 11-year tyranny. This is also important. So for 11 years, he ruled like a complete monarch, a true monarch, dictator. In what was happening in these 11 years? In these 11 years, Puritans were gathering power. Puritans were silently outside the court. They were waging a war against King Charles the First. They were taking a lot of public sympathies, and Charles the First did not care. And further, what did he do? He introduced William Laud's Book of Common Prayers in Scottish churches. And that Book of Common Prayers advocated episcopal system of church governments. Again, he was advocating episcopal system, that okay, we are different from Catholics, we are Protestants, but we will still continue with the popery culture, we will still continue with the clergymen. So then what happened? Bishops' war broke out. Bishops' war सुनते हैं हम लोग 1639 का. Bishops' war broke out, and that was the first civil war. What happens in the civil war? Everyone is pitted against everyone else. Everyone is very orthodox. They are very staunch and very bigoted. They are not tolerant of other person's belief. So the whole society was actually divided into Episcopalism and Presbyterianism. Okay, the religious dissent was the order of the day. It was in cafes. It was in books. It was in pamphlets. So that is why civil war broke. And when there is a war, there's a lot of bloodshed, there is a lot of violence, just like this is like a mini French Revolution, you can say. This period of King Charles the First is known as the mini French Revolution. Okay, and then तो pamphleteering and all फिर होने लग गया civil war में. तो चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट देन लाइसेंसिंग ऑर्डर भी निकाल दिया उन्होंने 1643 में, saying that nothing would be published without the consent of the court. The court will decide what has to be published. So this was curbing the freedom of the speech. उसके बाद तो all hell broke loose and people started attacking the court. They started attacking the palace. तो Henrietta Maria along with their son, she went into exile. They fled to Europe. She took her son to France. ठीक है. तो this is King Charles the Second जो आगे जाकर के king बनेगा. अभी for now he's a little boy and he has gone away with his mother. Meanwhile, Charles the First, he is incarcerated and he's tried and he is executed. He is tried for treason. And he is executed, and all this is happening under a leader, Oliver Cromwell. Okay, Oliver Cromwell, in that 11 years tyranny, a leader, Oliver Cromwell, established himself as a forebearer of Puritanism. He gathered lots of money, obviously, to fund the political agenda and a lot of public sympathy. ठीक है. Another thing is the Battle of Worcester. Battle of Worcester हुआ था जिसमें King Charles the Second, he tried to take the throne from Oliver Cromwell, but he could not succeed. Okay, he was defeated, and Oliver Cromwell became the Lord Protectorate of England. Okay, so this is the backdrop of Oliver Cromwell becoming the Lord Protectorate. Now, this period of Oliver Cromwell is known as Puritan interregnum. It is again an 11-year period. तो 11-year period है. एक तो 11 years tyranny है, and then there is 11 years of Puritan interregnum. Okay. And anyone wants to say something? Anything? Any doubt? Am I going too fast? Is it okay? Should we continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So okay, तो इसमें क्या हुआ कि monarchy was established. Now Parliament passed an order that there will be no more monarch. There would be only public elected representatives in English court. ठीक है, Oliver Cromwell becomes the Lord Protectorate, and okay, so now people have, we saw that people have Catholic tendencies. They don't know how to practice Christianity without the Pope or without the clergy. So Puritan leaders took it upon themselves, and then they said that, okay, we will teach you, we will tell you how to live your life. So what happened? Moral policing started happening. They started interfering in all domestic and social spheres of people, and they would be like SS, like German SS. Puritan leaders would be everywhere, looking over everyone's, like people who did not even matter, their daily affairs were being looked upon, spied upon, and there was a lot of lynching. And then they would, just so that they can claim some power, because otherwise how will you tell that, okay, now we are the powerful people? So what they would do, they would pick up anyone and accuse of adultery or accuse of any such illegitimate social acts, and they would lynch them. And that was all legitimate. That was all happening under Cromwell's rule. And another thing is, they started eulogizing human sufferings. Okay. Puritan leaders said that through suffering you will reach God. So you are in need of education. You are in need of being rescued by the feudal lord, okay, because you're a peasant, and you are in need of good sewage system, housing system. But no, what they said, that this is your suffering, through suffering you will reach God. So how convenient, right? You do not have to do anything as a government. You can just convince people that your suffering is the way to reach God. So ये तो काफी Catholicism जैसा ही लग रहा है. Catholic leaders also 200-300 years before that did the same thing. So people started realizing that nothing is actually changing. ठीक है? And theaters were banned because theaters are a way to renaissance into new life and new innovative thoughts, and it instills sort of critical thinking in you. So theaters were completely banned. Entertainment was banned. Entertainment is no entertainment, only think about God, and you should all be all the day preaching and praying. ठीक है? So and all these beliefs were being circulated through these are very orthodox and regressive beliefs, obviously, and they were circulated through pamphlets, and it was said that excuse me, that this is the future of England. So everything is looking exactly like how it was before. No futurism, no innovation. And further, what happened, that after Oliver Cromwell died, his son Richard succeeded him. So then this is exactly like monarchy. And जो 11-year period था, it was so terrible, and it was so pathetic. It was marred by civil wars, and it was marred by a lot of violence, that people thought that it's better. It was better in the times of monarchy. And during this time, what happened also, I did not write it here, we'll discuss it later, we'll discuss that later only. So anyways, so this was the period, this is the social backdrop to the Puritan rule. And we will go over the authors, and we will get to know how they wrote about these things. Then in 1660, after Oliver Cromwell died, people called Charles II back from exile and made him the king, but this time it was not monarchy, it was constitutional monarchy. What is constitutional monarchy and who inspired constitutional monarchy also we will see. And constitutional monarchy was established in England, which is still there in place, right? It's still in UK, there is constitutional monarchy. And ये जो and then Puritanism ended in England. This was the end of Puritanism. The Puritanism was all hardly there for 20, 30 years. And some Puritan leaders, they fled to America and to the eastern part, where they established New England, which is Boston, Massachusetts, Concord. वहां पे भी उन्होंने यही किया. उसके बाद in 1690s what happened? वहां पे lynching हुआ, वहां पे witch trials हुए, right? Nathaniel Hawthorne and American Transcendentals have all written about it. Herman Melville, right? So they were these same Puritans. वहां भी ज़्यादा दिन चला नहीं, but still, or the descendants of these same Puritans, they did exactly the same thing over there. ठीक है? Okay, I was sort of getting bored with, तो मैंने ये डाल दिया, आप लोग देख लेना. Like look at King Charles the First. ना, he's almost looking like Tughlaq, very whimsical, spontaneous, impulsive. And Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protectorate, wearing that warrior uniform, that I will be there to protect the nation. And then King Charles II, he's the rightful heir, and he's like sitting and enjoying his rightful position on the throne. So anyways, this just so that we know whom we are talking about, I googled these pictures. Okay, before moving to John Milton, because we are talking about so much of politics, we will study Thomas Hobbes. Because ये पूरा context, Thomas Hobbes was a philosopher, he was a polymath, and he was a very intelligent person. He was into politics, like jurisprudence, he was into history, he was like a real scholar. He was a scholar only next to John Milton. Okay, he had also met Galileo, and he was very influenced by him. So he is known as the father of modern political philosophy. So these people in England, they wanted change, but they did not know how. I mean, everyone wanted change in the way countries were led. But people did not know anything other than monarchy. So Thomas Hobbes was the one who had enlightened everyone. He's mostly known for Leviathan, and Leviathan thoda sa we will discuss. Okay, so Leviathan is the matter, form and power of commonwealth, ecclesiastical and civil. That is the title. Some of the concepts, important concepts that he had presented was the need of the sovereign ruler. We saw that how in a male-dominated sphere, Elizabeth I was able to bring everyone together under a national consciousness. So a sovereign ruler is important. That face is important, so that everyone can look up to that face and see the reflection of their sensitivities, their national social sensitivities. So he said that a sovereign ruler has to be there. And he also proposed how he should be ruled, and how and where his personal powers could be restricted, limited, so that it is in the benefit of the larger public. He said that the nature of man is, it is to be free. Rousseau ने क्या कहा था? Rousseau from French Revolution, I'm quoting here. Rousseau, because I'm quoting, because he was inspired by Thomas Hobbes. उन्होंने क्या कहा था? That a man is born free and everywhere he's in chains. Thomas Hobbes also said that naturally we are supposed to be free in the name of religion or society or law. A lot of our freedom is being curbed, which Thomas Hobbes said is a good thing. Because otherwise humanity would be constantly in the state of war, which was happening in the Civil War, is what he saw. And then the sovereign ruler would restrict your certain civil liberties in a good way, which will be like a social contract between the ruler and the public and the subjects of the state. That would be a social contract, that there is a certain way in which I can behave. in public. I cannot lynch anyone. There has to be a law where I cannot instill physical violence or even verbal abuse at anyone in the name of just voicing my own opinions. And that is what we see. That is what democracy is. You if you hurt someone's sentiments or you curb their fundamental rights through verbal abuse, you are charged for blasphemy and slander. राइट तो ये सब जो हम जो हमारा इतना सिस्टमैटिक वर्ल्ड देखते हैं, वी ऑल ओ इट टू थॉमस हॉब्स. हाँ, देन ही सेड बॉडी पॉलिटी. इतने सारे जो हम हमारे सिस्टम में ग्राम पंचायत है, देर मेयर के इलेक्शंस हैं, एंड एट एवरी लेवल देर इज अ body of politics that is representative of the public and that works for the public. So ये सब कैसे होगा? That Thomas Hobbes has suggested. Imagine way back in 1651, which is like sensational, right? So he also said that how civil and ecclesiastical authority has to be different. Now this is where Thomas Hobbes भी फंस गया, because he was also way ahead of his times. He was talking very futuristic. So he's saying that sovereign ruling में civil and ecclesiastical authority को अलग अलग रख दो. So oh my God, what is he suggesting? He's suggesting secularism. He's suggesting that the ruler should be tolerant of all the faiths and all the beliefs. Secularism was a bad word. Secularism was it was not a good word. Even today, it is not a good word in certain countries. So you cannot be a secular. So for this, Leviathan was tried also in the court. Okay, because he suggested this. He suggested the ecclesiastical authority ko alag rakho, religious authority should be different, civil authority should be different. There should be law that should be common to all. Okay, so for that, and then he also envisioned some role for the religion, that what should be the religion ka role, ya what sort of morality should be preached. So in this manner Leviathan is very important, and Leviathan के ऊपर तो पूरा एक क्लास भी हो सकता है. तो we can see that a lot of modern constitutions are also based on Thomas Hobbes and Jefferson, who is the founding father of America. Right, United States of America, one of the founding fathers, Jefferson, उन्होंने एक कोट भी Leviathan से लिया है अपने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में. This quote that is written in green: all men are created equal and are endowed with certain unalienable rights. To secure these rights, governments are to be instituted. So I mean, Thomas Hobbes is directly, and we know that even when I was reading or studying it, I can see a reflection of a lot of Indian constitution in Leviathan. So somewhere or the other, democracy, republic, sovereign countries are inspired by Thomas Hobbes. Okay, so Thomas Hobbes is very important. And then what happened, Thomas Hobbes के साथ उन्होंने ये trilogy भी लिखी है, and he has also written a spiritual autobiography which was posthumously published. I'm sorry I did not write that. आप लोग Google कर लेना. Because the Leviathan was tried in the courts after the Restoration for secularism, for suggesting secularism. Thomas Hobbes resigned himself from the public sphere, and he died alone, and he did not get much appreciation obviously for his work, because लोगों को इतना समझ में भी नहीं आया वो. Okay, so now we come to John Milton. So everyone might have read Milton, might have read Paradise Lost over and over and over again. So in fact, I'm very apprehensive whether I can do justice to John Milton or not. Anyway, I'll try. So in case you guys feel like interrupting me, or you guys want to add something, so unmute yourself and say something. I'll stop. Okay, is that all right? If you guys want to add something.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So far, any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so Milton's period, Milton, we saw that he was born in the times of King James. So his writing period is segregated into three parts. One is his formative years, in which he wrote poetry and elegies, and during that time he was inspired a lot by Edmund Spenser and Petrarch, even little bit of Petrarch. But you can see a lot of Spenserian stanzas in his early poetry, pastoral elegies he wrote. We'll see that. Okay, so during this time he was friends. He was friends with Charles Diodati. For him, he has written 2 elegies, and he was a student at Christ College, Cambridge, where he was known as the Lady of the Christ. That also, I think most of us know. And after he completed his MA, he went to tour France and Italy. After he came back, he saw England plagued with civil wars. Because in 1639, Bishops' War had broken out, and that was the beginning of the first civil war. At that time, Charles I was still in rule. So Milton, being the what do you say, like very revolutionary, creative, young artist, he just involved himself into the politics of the day, and he wrote a lot of prose and a lot of pamphlets. He became friends with Oliver Cromwell, and that is how he inculcated Puritan tendencies, because Puritanism originally promised change in a good way. Puritanism promised doing away from all the corrupt Catholic practices, although it did not pan out like that. So for a young writer like John Milton, it was very promising. And then after Cromwell came to power, John Milton was appointed as Secretary of Foreign Tongues. Cromwell, in a way, used John Milton. We will see how. That is how politicians do. Okay, ये मैं नहीं बोल रही हूँ. Many historians have said that, and especially C.E. Trevelyan, and also on Milton. Lot of people have written on Milton. We'll come to that in 20th century. And Milton himself, you can see in his mature years, when he is writing Paradise Lost and he was writing epics and epilions, he was questioning his beliefs a lot. After the Cromwell's rule, he resigned himself from the public life and he became a recluse. He had also lost his eyesight by then, and it was very detrimental to the psyche of a scholar who had involved his whole life into reading and writing. What would he do without eyes? So he had a bad existential crisis, and he really did question his beliefs, and he was in a not that good of state of mind during his last years. And incidentally, during this time, he wrote the best of his works, right? Okay, so these are some of his early works. First, we'll discuss his poetry. This is Ode on the Death of a Fair Infant Dying of a Cough. This is considered to be his first work. This he wrote while he was studying in Cambridge. While he was studying in Cambridge, he also wrote Quinctum Novembris. Abhi हमने देखा था. Quinctum Novembris means November 5th. It is about the Guy Fawkes Day. Remember the 5th of November. ये एक स्लोगन भी आया था उस टाइम पे. किसी को पता है गाय फॉक्स डे? अभी हम लोगों ने डिस्कस किया था ना, गन पाउडर प्लॉट अगेंस्ट किंग जेम्स द फर्स्ट, ये वाला. गन पाउडर प्लॉट, गाय फॉक्स डे. ठीक है, तो मिल्टन हैज रिटन अ पोम अबाउट इट. दैट इज ये इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकता है. क्विंटस नवम्बरस. Also, Guy Fawkes Day features in Hardy's which novel? In Thomas Hardy's novel, it features Guy Fawkes Day. कौन सी novel में? किसी को याद है? Anyone wants to discuss? Wants to share? So like this, you can study.
Return of the Native. I think.
Yes. Eustacia Y वाले इसमें, right? She wanted to flee away from Edgar Heath to Paris, है ना?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Then Milton wrote on Shakespeare. ये भी I think most of us know. on the morning of Christ's nativity, known as the Nativity Ode. It is considered to be first Miltonic work. In that it's written in that blank verse, in that grand style of Milton with extended metaphors, which is known as a Miltonic style. Then companion poems Il Allegro in Penseroso, The Happy Man, and The Melancholy Man. This is these are pastoral elegies. This could be important. Horton poems, 3 Horton poems. जैसे आ जाएगा नेट में कि which one of these is not a Horton poem. तो because these are lesser known works, तो इसको थोड़ा title याद रख लेना. And he also wrote two mass at that time, Arcade and Comus. These are also famous. Yes, and then elegy wale time mein he wrote three elegies. 2 elegies were for Charles Diodati, his close friend, Elegia Premia, which was about the rustigation of Diodati from Christ College, Cambridge, and even at this time Milton was about to be rusticated because they had an altercation with some professor, verbal altercation. Then Lycidas is Milton's the poem pastoral elegy for Edward the King. This also in detail you guys might have studied. And then Epitaphium Demonis for again Charles Diodati on Diodati's death. Okay. ठीक है, we should move forward, है ना, because we have to do a few more authors. So Milton's prose. This was Milton's political time. He was involved in politics. So he wrote on Reformation, that Reformation to ho gaya and Protestantism bhi aa gaya, but we are not ready to let go of Catholic tendencies. Okay, he's advocating Presbyterianism in apology for smectimnus. Smectimnus is actually an abbreviation for 4 Presbyterian thinkers from Europe. It is important. Apology for smectimnus. देख लेना, smectimnus is not a word, it's an abbreviation. उसको साथ में scholars they have made it into a word because those 4 people who advocated Presbyterian had similar thinking and similar thought processes. ठीक है, तो उनके लिए मिल्टन ने एक apology लिखी. Apology मतलब defending their thoughts, which is again advocating Presbyterianism. Then Milton wrote 4 divorce tracts. Milton advocated divorce because he both his marriages were not romantic, or he was not able to make peace with either of his wife actually. Then of education he wrote Areopagitica pamphlet, which was in response to the licensing order. King Charles I ने निकाला था that you cannot publish anything without the permission or consent of the court. तो उसके response में Milton wrote Areopagitica. It's also, I think you guys might have studied, it's very popular. Then Milton wrote Iconoclastus. तो Iconoclastus जो word है ICON, Iconoclastus, that word is taken from this Iconoclastus, which means breaking the image. This was written in response to King Charles I's spiritual autobiography. When Charles I was incarcerated and he was being tried, during that time he wrote a spiritual autobiography, which was sneaked and published पहले तो, but Oliver Cromwell came into rule and he banned it. उन्होंने वो बैन कर दिया. But after Oliver Cromwell's death, when Richard Cromwell ascended now, at that time again someone leaked the spiritual autobiography of King Charles I. And then after 11 years, 12 years, people read it and people resonated with King Charles I. And public had a tendency to believe that maybe they misunderstood King Charles I. And maybe they were too harsh on King Charles I, and that he should not have been, executed in such a brutal manner. That was also another reason why people restored the monarchy, and in that guilt, they brought back the son of King Charles I, that is King Charles II, to throne of England. Okay, that was also, they were guilt ridden. Then A Tenure of Kings and Magistrates is another Milton's pamphlet. Okay. So Milton, we can see that Cromwell is using Milton. That जैसे ही कुछ Charles the First के advocacy में आ रहा है, तो Milton is countering that. तो Milton is social media नहीं था, but Milton is influencing the people of his times through pamphlets. So then फिर क्या हुआ, in the middle of all of this, an anonymous pamphlet came, The Cry for the King's Blood. This pamphlet, it was anonymous, and this moved Milton. This was also a reason why Milton went into a lot of self-introspection and self-doubt. Because इसमें clearly that person has very ruthlessly blamed Milton's blindness for as a punishment for execution of King Charles the First, because Milton was, and then Milton started feeling that he had the blood of King Charles the First on his hands. But anyways, he defended himself through, first he wrote a sonnet on his blindness, okay, in which there is that famous line that he helps those who only wait, who only stand and wait, है ना? Or there is also that line, na? When I see how my light is spent, like when I recall how I used to read, or what I used to read, or what was I doing when I had the light, and doing what did I lose my eyesight. So ये पूरा एक defense Milton wrote in the form of sonnet, and he also wrote a second defense to this same pamphlet. So they might ask you on his blindness was written in response to which pamphlet. So it is The Cry for the King's Blood. Okay. Anyone wants to add something? Anyone wants to say something? Anything to discuss? No? Should we move forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Milton's epic period. Now this is Milton's the period. Of course, Paradise Lost was published first in 10 books in 1667, and then in 12 books in 1672. In 1672, because in 1671 Samson Agonistes and Paradise Regained were published together. So Samson Agonistes, some facts I have given. Many of you might know, might have studied these works in detail, very in detail. We studied in our BA and MA. So we will not go too much into detail. Also, it will take a lot of time. So Samson Agonistes का भी some facts है that if you guys want we can discuss, or you guys can see it yourself. अच्छा, यहाँ पे मैंने ये Aldous Huxley, Vita Sackville West लिख दिया because ये जो lines हैं from Samson Agonistes, I.E.H.E in Gaza at mill with the slaves. That I.E.H.E in Gaza title is taken by Aldous Huxley for one of his novels, and calm of mind, all passion spent is again a line from Samson Agonistes, and all passion spent is the title that Vita Sackville West took from here. Who was Vita Sackville West? Unmute and say.
Ma'am, she was a contemporary of Woolf.
Yeah.
And there was a humor that both were in love with each other.
Yes. Yes. And one more important fact, literary fact. What is the name of the biography that Woolf wrote for Vita Sackville West? फ्लश है ना, फ्लश लिखा था उन्होंने, थ्रू दी आईज ऑफ देयर डॉग फ्लश, है ना. ओके, सो रिमेम्बर दैट. और बीटा साइकिल वेस्ट also inspired Orlando some ways. Okay, देख लेना, थोड़ा सा स्टडी कर लेना. Okay, कुछ important Miltonic critiques by William Blake. William Blake has written Milton and Epic. A lot of people have written on Milton. Then in Marriage of Helen Neville, Blake accused, or he referred to Milton as the devil's advocate. उसके बहुत सारे interpretations हो सकते हैं. One thing was that Blake was calling Puritanism or Oliver Cromwell as a devil, and that Milton defended a lot of Puritan values for the government of Oliver Cromwell. या फिर ये भी हो सकता है कि Milton himself was justifying that there is good and evil in both of us, and Satan is as important as the God. I mean, there are many interpretations. I think you guys can come up with better interpretations than me. Anyways, important thing is this to know. And then William Hazlitt has written, he has commented on Milton's sonnets, that if you compare it with Paradise Lost, they are like tender flowers that adorn the base of some proud column on stately temple. This line could be important. Now they will ask who has said this about Milton's sonnets, and then they will give lots of William Blake, William Hazlitt, and then they will ask किसने बोला है. इसलिए I thought of giving you this fact. Then Matthew Arnold was the first who said that Milton wrote in grand style, and his blank verses, use of blank verse, extended metaphors, and his also rich vocabulary, Milton's rich vocabulary. So Matthew Arnold called it the grand style. Where did he call it? In an Oxford lecture, while he was lecturing in Oxford. The name of the lecture was on translating Homer. And Matthew Arnold also compared Milton's readings to Longinus' sublimity. जैसे So am I back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I had a power issue. Okay, so where were we? We were in Matthew Arnold. So Matthew Arnold, in Study of Poetry, also said that Milton's writings have high seriousness. He said four authors have high seriousness in their writings: Homer, Dante, Milton, and Shakespeare. So Milton was one of them. Okay, so this was in short about Milton. Now we will move on to Sir Thomas Browne. Is it getting very boring? बहुत ज़्यादा boring हो गया?
No, ma'am.
Understandable? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Sir Thomas Browne. So now अभी तक we are talking about Puritans. Now Browne was a anti-Puritan and he empathized with King Charles the First because he was a royalist throughout. That is why he was knighted as Sir by Charles II when the monarchy was restored. Okay, so Browne we know as a scientific theologian. He was inspired by Francis Bacon and he wanted to find religious answers through science, because that is what Bacon said, right? Empiricism, that you have to find answers to everything through logics and through rationals. So that is what Browne also did. He actually pondered a lot about religion, but in a scientific manner. He started finding science behind many age-old customs and rituals, and he started justifying people, and the rituals that did not make sense, he also encouraged people to just let go of them. So that's how Browne is important. He has written Religio Medici, what should be the religion of the doctor, because science had come in and people were dealing with a lot of body anatomy and there are so many orthodox rituals in every hamlet and every region which do not make sense in the contemporary world. That is something we can all experience in our day-to-day lives. So that's how just like Thomas Hobbes, he also tried to give treatises where you can find a balance between religion and science. Okay, just like Hobbes tried to find a balance between the civil, the legal aspect, the faculties, and the religion. Then he wrote Pseudodoxica Epidemica, which means vulgar errors, which is about errors that are so vulgar, rituals or things that we do that are so inscientific or irrational that we should just do away with them. Again, that same sort of argument. Then hydrotaphy. Hydrotaphy is important because in Norfolk, some urn burials were discovered, meaning some graves which were old Roman graves of a community were discovered, and they were all they had like very nice architecture and sculpturing over them. So Browne is reminiscing on a lot of aspects. One thing is that you are so bigoted and you're so staunch in your beliefs, either as a Puritan or as a royalist or as a Catholic, but in the end we all meet the same fate and we will all be buried together as a community. So this was also a cry for peace in a way, like a metaphor. And on the surface, what he talked about was different burying rituals, how different burying rituals reflect the societies, how the societies were, that you can see through the burying rituals. Then again Virginia Woolf यहाँ पे आ गई, because Virginia Woolf was the one who would staunchly she would read Browne, and she also encouraged other people to read Browne, calling them that if you do read Browne, that you will become the salt of the earth, meaning you will become the taste, you will develop a taste, and you will also be remembered if you read Browne. Also Herman Melville also read Browne. ठीक है, तो short about Browne. Then Isaac Walton. Isaac Walton is important in the sense so these are all contemporaries of John Milton that we are discussing. Okay, so Isaac Walton is also important in the sense that he was an anti-Puritan and he was the biographer of John Donne. John Donne जो metaphysical जिससे metaphysics inspired है. Okay, he wrote a biography. He wrote short biography of 4-5 people who were his fishing buddies. And he was an ardent his hobby was to fish, so he has written a fishing book, The Complete Angler is that hook जिससे fishing करते हैं. Okay, उस book का title है The Complete Angler. So who has written a book about archery in Elizabethan period? This is 17th century. In 16th century someone wrote a book about archery. अब वो आर्चरी होता है ना, बो एंड एरो से करना. Who has written a book about that? बताओ. Okay, I'll give you a hint. He was the tutor of Queen Elizabeth I.
Roger Ascham.
Yes, Roger Ascham. Who has written The Schoolmaster? Yes, he wrote courtesy books. Right, he was a tutor to Elizabeth I. So he has written Toxophilus, मतलब the lover of archery. ठीक है, तो he has written a book on archery. Now this man Isaac Walton, he has written a book on fishing, and we will see someone who has written a book on gardening also. तो ऐसे club करके you guys can remember. ठीक है. He has written आगे सी हाँ मैंने लिखा है कि Walton has written biography of John Donne. Of course we know John Donne, Henry Wotton, George Herbert, Richard Hooker, Robert Sanderson. So we know all of these guys except for Henry Wotton. I mean I didn't know Henry Wotton. So who was Henry Wotton? Henry Wotton was also a poet of his time. And Relic Wottonia करके कुछ आया था जिसमें he has written 15 poems. ये सब बहुत minor. See, they ask minor things about minor major contemporary authors का वो नहीं पूछते हैं, कई बार कुछ भी पूछ लेते हैं. तो that is why any name that we come across we have not studied, we do not know, तो उसका एक short note बना लेना चाहिए so that at least we can eliminate the answers कि ये नहीं हो सकता. तो any alien name आता है तो हम लोगों को एक बार गूगल करके एक नोट बना लेना चाहिए so that we also remember. Okay. Then Thomas Fuller. Okay. Now how do we know Fuller? Yes, we know. Okay. So Fuller was also an anti-Puritan. So you can see a lot of anti-Puritans in the Milton dominated Puritanism. In the Puritan period only there are so many anti-Puritans. ठीक है. So he was a theologian primarily, and he was interested in antique things, antique thoughts and things, meaning he must be a little bit orthodox, must be reticent to change. ठीक है. So he has written a satire on Oliver Cromwell, Andronicus, or the unfortunate politician. Then Fuller most importantly is known for Histories of the Worthies of England, which is an unfinished collection of biographies. ये पूछा भी था नेट में एक बार, match the following में, when I took net once. ठीक है. Histories of the Worthies of England, this is important. Church history of Britain. So we can see he is a sort of a researcher. He is writing a lot about history, and he also wrote the history of the Holy War. ये भी important हो सकता है. So he wrote about crusades. Okay, so someone share what was crusades.
Ma'am, it was war between Christianity and Islam for the occupation of Jerusalem.
Yes, and who in Canterbury Tales commented on crusades. In Canterbury Tales, someone commented on crusades, and through that character, Chaucer expressed his anti-crusade anti-crusade sentiments?
I think it is the Knight
Knight.
because he
Knight.
was the part of Crusades.
Yes, obviously Knight was sort of mocked, but Parson also. In Parson's tale, he says that even if the violence in the name of religion is sanctioned by the highest high of the priest, it is not free of sin. It is not free of the God's sin, and it will bring a huge prick on your conscience. ऐसा एक लाइन है from the Parson's tale, ठीक है, which is one of the prose tales. तो मतलब that's what I remember. तो I thought I'll share. तो Crusades पढ़ के मुझे वही याद आ जाता है. तो some middle English authors like Dante and who has written Petrarch, who has written the epic Africa, and Chaucer. So these people openly had anti-crusade sentiments. They have written about it. They did not sanction this crusades that happened for more than 200 years in 11th and 12th century, right? ठीक है, ऐसा भी पूछ सकते हैं. मतलब इतने ज्यादा स्मार्ट क्वेश्चंस अब पूछते नहीं है. दे आर आस्किंग अ लॉट ऑफ chronology only. बीच में they were asking good questions in net, no doubt, but still we should know ऐसा why we are studying in this biography, that what were their beliefs. तो authors के beliefs तो बहुत important होते हैं, political beliefs, and whether they are aligning with the larger political agenda of their times or they are not. That determines a lot of their work, that determines a lot of their fame and their future as an author also, है ना? So these things are definitely important. Okay, now we will talk about Jeremy Taylor. So Jeremy Taylor was he was like John Donne only, he was a poet, but more importantly he was a clergyman, so he was involved in religious activities. Also because he belonged to a family of clergies. But he sort of became in soup. He came because he openly propagated episcopal philosophy and Puritanism. जब आ गया तो often he was imprisoned by Oliver Cromwell. He was also a royalist. Not royalist as such, but he had a very strong faith, unwavering faith to Christianity. And somewhere down the line, when people are like that, now they are reticent to change, and they believe that they look up to Pope only, they look up to Rome only for the validation for their faith. So he was also one of those people. He was a spiritual advisor to John Evelyn, the diarist, which also we will study about John Evelyn. है ना? That way is also Jeremy Taylor becomes important. He is known as the Shakespeare of the divines. He would give sermons in poetic manner. वो थोड़ी a poetic way में with metaphors and similes like Shakespeare wrote, na, like that he used to give his sermons. These are his important works. These works, मतलब they are important. ऐसा we should know as English literature students. Jeremy Taylor हम लोग कम पढ़ते हैं, but Jeremy Taylor also they ask. Also because of this background of his first 2-3 points, na, Shakespeare of the divines, advisor to John Evelyn. So these things are important that ways. So he wrote about holy living, holy dying. Holy living, holy dying तो शायद सुना भी होगा आप लोगों ने. Discourse on the liberty of professing. So he was not able to profess whatever he used to profess. So Oliver Cromwell's moral police would come and incarcerate him, and then he would get out on bail. This kept on happening during that 11-year Puritan interregnum with him. So that is why maybe he might have written this, that he needed a liberty to profess. Then John Evelyn. So John Evelyn we all know as the diarist. He was a landowner, though he came from wealth, he came from money. He was a gardener, he was a courtier, and he is now remembered as a diarist. He wrote that personal account for a long time, for most of his adult years. And जितने भी major historical events जो अभी हम लोगों ने discuss किए हैं, how do we know all of this? Because of him, Samuel Pepys, है ना? Because of these people we know. So he wrote about execution and then Cromwell's rise and then its ramifications, plague of England, fire of London. All this he has described at length. Now the diary obviously was written during his lifetime, which was from 1620 to 1706, but it was published in 1818 and it coincided with Samuel Pepys' diary. Samuel Pepys' diary was also published during this time. So Pepys' diary sort of overshadowed John Evelyn's diary. So people read more of Pepys and less of John Evelyn, but John Evelyn has described impersonally a lot of historical events at length with a little or no of his own opinion. तो फिर then drama भी नहीं रहता है ना. Then people would obviously like to read someone who has given a lot of personal opinion on these major socio-political events. So that is why Samuel Pepys' diary was read. And his was not read that much. But abhi to as diarist ki list mein to we study John Evelyn. And he is the one who wrote about the gardening. Okay? So we today we learned someone who wrote a book about archery and someone who wrote a book about fishing and then someone who wrote a book about gardening. Okay? Silva he wrote. Okay, so some of the people who have written important works on Oliver Cromwell. Andrew Marvell we know as a metaphysical poet. He was also an amanuensis to Milton, which is a fancy word for scribe. He was a scribe to Milton. Many of us know that. All of us know that. And Andrew Marvell also inspired Dryden's Mac Flecknoe. Andrew Marvell had written something like Richard Flecknoe. He had met a poet who was like foolhardy poet. So for that Andrew Marvell has written a poem and usse inspire होके Dryden wrote Mac Flecknoe in Restoration period. It's an important fact तो मैंने यहाँ पे डाल दिया. ठीक है, आप लोग थोड़ा सा चेक कर लेना when you study Andrew Marvell in metaphysical poets. Remember in our last class we talked about structuralism. उसमें we were studying new critics. What did new critics say? ये यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा हम लोग पीछे जाएंगे, थोड़ा सा, very little. So Cleanth Brooke and Robert Penn, what did they say? That through Andrew Marvell's and Horatian Ode upon Cromwell's return from Ireland, we cannot attempt to read Andrew Marvell's mind. What we can only do is we can just see the structure of the poem. And what was their central argument? New critics ka argument, Brooks and Warren ka, that we really don't know what was Andrew's standpoint, whether it was Puritan or it was royalist. What was his political standpoint? Through the structure of this poem, we cannot even fathom whether it's a satire or he was really expressing his allegiance to Oliver Cromwell. Okay, that was their argument. New critics ka argument. So when we read this an Horatian Ode upon Cromwell's return, we should keep our mind open that maybe Andrew Marvell was not a complete Puritan. Also, why would it have been so? Because he was after Milton got blind, Andrew Marvell had close association with Milton, and that was the time of Milton's own self-doubt, Milton's own introspection, which is very evident in Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, and the way he was penning Satan, and he was trying to find answers to all sorts of questions, and he was going back to the advent of the humanity just to find some answers that were present problems were posing him. So Andrew Marvell also had also might have experienced some sort of doubt when England society rejected Puritanism and Puritan thought. So I think अब हमको Cleanth Brooks and Robert Penn Warren का argument थोड़ा और अच्छे से समझ में आएगा, because they have eulogized a present ruler, but many times poets also have an agenda of not being cancelled, because they will be cancelled in today's terms if they do not align themselves with the larger agenda. Okay, so we cannot study Andrew Marvell's mind. हम उनका mind study नहीं कर सकते. We can only read his poem very objectively. Moving forward, John Dryden has also written a heroic stanza on the death of Oliver Cromwell. our Lord Protectorate. And then John Dryden also wrote Astrea Redux when Charles II came to power. है ना? And Dryden converted from Puritanism to Anglicanism also, right? What is his conversion poem? Dryden's conversion poem, Hind and the Panther. Abhi we will not get ahead because that you will study in future classes, or you might have studied in your BA or MA. ठीक है. Then Eulogy on the Death of Cromwell is by Edmund Waller. Edmund Waller is a Cavalier. Abhi we will see what is a Cavalier. Edmund Waller is known for topographical poems. He has also written Eulogy on the Death of Cromwell. Now, because we are talking about a very central figure, so people who have written about Cromwell, wo sab you will get in this slide. I have tried to encompass even if we are not discussing that author in detail. ठीक है? Okay, now we are coming to an end, towards the end. Poetry in 17th century, other than the authors that we have discussed, was metaphysicals were there who were inspired by John Donne. These are all the metaphysicals of the 17th century. And then they were the Cavaliers. Cavaliers were the royalists who had their allegiance to King Charles I. They were the poets of King Charles I's court. Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Richard Lovelace, John Suckling, they wrote marvelously. They were very creative. This Cavaliers and their poetry could be done in a separate class. And they were inspired by Ben Jonson. Just like metaphysicals were inspired by John Donne, the Cavaliers were inspired by Ben Jonson. And mostly their poetry had this sensitivity of carpe diem, that seize the day, and they lived in the present. And of course they will live in the present because they lived in opulence in the court. Okay? So they are also known as the sons of Bens. So these were also the poets of the 17th century, but they demand a separate class of their own. Okay, so I'll sum it up over here. Thank you. That was Puritanism and the Age of Milton.
I would now like to invite Mugdha Devaskar for the vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon, ma'am. I am first of all very sorry for not being able to turn my camera on because of facing some camera issues. But first of all, I would extend a warm thank you and a very big gratefulness to the English department for conducting such informative and interesting lectures and helping us out with the further preparations. On the behalf of all us students and the committee members, I would extend a very warm thank you to ma'am, you also, for giving your precious time and making such interesting PPTs and giving us pointed notes, which are, as we know that resources today are very hard to find, and that makes it very easy for us to make notes and understand things easily. We hope to have even more interesting and more informative lectures with you in the future as well. And even today's lecture was very interesting, and I also thank all the students for being such good listeners, and it always is a delight to listen to you. And we hope to be together in further future lectures as well. Very big thank you to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please thank Chaturvedi sir on my behalf, and thank you all for listening. Bye. Enjoy your Sunday.